Okay, I believe we have started our stream. We've started it in one of the more bizarre ways I've ever, not that I've done a lot of streaming, but I had to strain some of what's the sediment at the bottom of the wine out of my wine glass. So I was going back and forth with the strainer. So that's why I was late to my own stream. Welcome to Soup Night. I had one of those days at work where you spend more time processing what happened than it actually took to solve the problem because it's just so ridiculous. And I needed a soup night to relax with you guys. So I thought, wouldn't it be fun? Let's just do a stream tonight. I have a little run of show for us, if you will. I'll move you over. Let's get you caught up on what we're doing tonight. So this soup night, this evening, shout out to Princess Peanut. I definitely still need the fabulous Ferb, Miss Peanut's mother, got a new pup as well. So I need her photos as well. But anyway, we are starting with chop and chat. I gotta chop all the veg for the soup. The stock is already on the stove, so we're good there. But I gotta actually chop the veg that will be going into the soup. And then it's time to feed the Suze. If you haven't heard the news, I got a dog. Her name is Susie. She's the sweetest girl in the world. So you'll get to meet Susie, and I have to do her dinner time specifically because she has some meds that she has to take. So we can talk about that too while I'm doing it. I can walk you through what I do. But anyway, then we're gonna go and talk about, okay, Allison Mack is back, you guys. She's back. She did a podcast with CBC. I'm going to talk all about it because if there's one thing anyone knows about me is that if there is cult news, especially about NXIVM, I am going to have opinions on it. So I figured I would give myself something to chat about tonight. We can also catch up on Thanksgiving and stuff like that. But that's what we're going to talk about at 6:30. And then by 7, the stock should be ready to strain off. So I'll just do that while we chat and then we'll say goodnight because then I need to release you back to your lives after you've spent your time hanging out with me. Anyway, so that is what we're doing tonight. I am just gonna double check one thing on the computer. It was once again me doing that thing where I'm like, oh, how do I do this thing? How do I? So, okay, it says that we're live. It says that we're live on the tube. I just wanted to triple check. I'm trying to learn how to stream, so I'm using a streaming thing, OBS. I should learn the terminology. Something else for me to research this weekend. But anyway, chop and chat first. Do you want to come with me while we chop and chat? It's really up to me. This is my world. You're living in it. Yeah, why not? I'll bring you a little bit closer for chop and chat. I just got to move. I have one of these. I'll bring you with me. I have one of these, mats. It's squishy. There's a little bit of squish to it for me to stand on while I do the dishes at the sink. Because while I don't mind doing dishes at all, actually, there we go. My first job in high school was as a dishwasher at a pizza place. So I really don't mind doing dishes. I quite enjoy it. But standing there forever, just, of course, is always a nightmare. So I'll slide it over so I can stand on it while I'm chopping the veg and we'll chat. All right, you are on the most rickety. Technically, it's like a bar cart. There's a rack for wine bottles. So you're technically on a bar cart. I got it. My mom actually got it for me. God bless her. When I moved into a teeny, teeny, tiny little apartment in which I had basically no counter space. And so she got me. So she's like, okay, you can move it around and do stuff. And it is serviceable. It's now 10 years old or something. And it was not a quality product that was built. I have my kitchen table, that is a butcher block of wood on some steel legs. That baby's fine. This thing is a little bit more precarious. So when I try to push and move it around, it kind of shivvy and shakes on me. Anyway, cheers. Welcome to Soup Night, my dear. Okay, this is from a bottle that Lauren gave me during my birthday soup night. It was ours because I invite people over, but it was to celebrate my birthday. But so she brought a bottle of wine over that we never ended up drinking. And so I've been drinking it over the last, probably too long, over the last couple of weeks, to be honest, just when I need a glass of wine. So I had to finish it off. So we are sponsored by the gift of wine from Lauren. So thank you, Lauren, my dear. Okay, so the stock is brewing. I'll show you just so I want to make sure that you know what we're up to. Okay, stock on the stove. Look at her. Look at her, bubble and boil. I have her uncovered. Now, actually, I'll cover her up now. I had her uncovered for a while because I definitely overfilled her. We're just kind of moving as we go. Today, we're doing the best we can with what we got. So I definitely overfilled her when I was setting her on the stove. So I just let some of the excess water boil off. That is the great thing about overfilling when it's a stock, is what you really want is basically you're taking the water and you're leaching all of the goodness out of the veg, and this is chicken broth, so the chicken carcass and the bones, and there's some of the congealed fat that goes in there, and whatnot. You're leaching all the good stuff out and concentrating it into the water to make the broth stock. So if you boil it down, it's just going to end up being more concentrated. So, which I don't mind. Concentration means flavor. So, okay, we're going to start with l'oignon. This is my last onion. I need to grab another, but this was feeling a little bit dull earlier. So I'm just going to wash and sharpen this really quick, just because I don't want to have to deal with a dull blade when I'm doing all this chopping. Just a rinse at the sink and then dry this off. Actually, I found this new gal on, oh God, what do we call it? Because don't the social media apps all listen to, and if you say someone else's name, then they ding you? We're calling it the clock app, whatever it is. You know which one I'm talking about. But so she always starts out her videos being like, hi, I'm a former, she went to culinary school and worked in restaurants, and then she ended up working in corporate, and now she's burnt out on that. So she's trying to rediscover her love of cooking. She's a fantastic teacher. I really like her. She's doing a lot more, fundamentals and stuff. It's just really wonderful to listen to her teach. She clearly, knows a lot. And she's been a home chef, a home cook, rather than working in the restaurant industry for quite a few years. So she also has that balance of being hey, look, most of my dinners are just what I cook at home as well. This is kind of what I do. This is the technical way of doing it. This is what I do. It's fine. And one of the things that she taught me was actually that I wasn't sharpening my knife enough. Because I just have one of these little dudes, and this is not the best way to sharpen your knife. I got it at I'm gonna say a Bed Bath & Beyond, if that's even still in business, back when I was in college. And essentially what this does is, rather than having a sharpening stone, this has two different grits, 1 and 2, in which you would do what you would do on a sharpening stone, but just inside these little ridges. So a sharpening stone is obviously better, but this is just what I have. But so I was only running it through a couple of times. I was yeah, that seems like it probably should do something. And she was teaching in her knife sharpening video that she did of no, you want to go 10 to 15 times on each grit. And when you're done sharpening, you should be wiping off a thin layer of metal that you're shaving off, or whatever your knife is made out of. You are removing that, somewhat thin layer to sharpen the blade. So I was oh, okay. So I'm not sharpening it enough. I'm just sharpening it a little bit. And so I did it the number of times. She said I want to say 10 to 15 strokes at each grit, and then using just a honing steel, which is that tall, thin one, where if you've seen people you kind of hold it down and you shave the knife sides on the sides of it. I don't have one, so you're just gonna have to pretend. But so you just use that for little touch-ups, and this is for really sharpening your knife. And so I don't think my knife needed a full real resharpen, but just enough. And so now I'm gonna take, I'll just take this towel. I'm going to wash this one shortly anyway. And then I'm just going to wipe off the blade and make sure I got off. And like you can barely see it. I really didn't sharpen it a lot, but there's like a tiny little bit of gray right there. That's from the actual like steel of the blade. Anyway, now that we've gotten that out of the way, actually I want to shout her out super quick. I'm going to see if I can't find her in my follows. I don't have a ton. I don't follow a ton of people on there. So I think I can figure it out pretty quickly. Also, the first video that popped up when I opened it was a Maisie Peters video, which is very funny because I have been listening to her, I think it was her debut album, the one where she's sitting on the subway, on a bus, like a London bus. You signed up for this. That's what it's called. That's like the title track. But I've been listening to it for the last like day and a half. And I really have enjoyed watching it again. Oh, okay. So this is in order. Oh, the Chef Diaries, _Chef Diaries is her. Oh my gosh, she has 37.3 thousand followers. She's not like, I mean, she's posted a good amount of videos at this point. But like my understanding is that she was doing this like whole series pretty recently. So good for fucking her. Let's go, babe. Her bio says slut for nugs. Same. Anyway, so she's my current one true love of who I am enjoying when I see them on my feed. And she's teaching me something. And the best content out there is educational, in my opinion. I mean, entertainment is fun as well. But you know what? Edutainment. Give me that sweet, sweet edutainment. I saw a video. I sent it to my friend, actually, and she responded with something to the effect of, like, incredibly too early in the morning for me to be watching it because it was puppets explaining Karl Marx's theory of, is it the theory of isolation? But it's, first of all, it's a masterpiece. Fantastic content. And educational. I didn't know much about it. I started doing research after I watched the very fun puppets. But yeah, to be confronted with that at 7 a.m. I'm sure is a bit of a wake-up call. And that's part of the issue of us being so available to everyone these days is I'm not in the right headspace to listen to puppets talk about Karl Marx, okay? There's a time and a place for that sometimes. Not that I don't want to, obviously I want to see it. It sounds incredible. You know, it's just time and place. Just throwing out some of these onion bits. I have some little Christmas tunes on in the background. It's promised me that they are DCMA takedown free because I'm not sure if that applies here. My friend has tried to explain it to me a couple of times. I think it's just like if you can watch it, like watch a playback, then you need to. But if you're just like streaming it and then it's gonna disappear into the void, it doesn't matter. Anyway, I don't know. Something else I need to look up over the weekend. I have so many weekend plans for myself, the things that I need to do, not in a bad way, in a great way. I'm actually really excited. I went to my folks' place for the Thanksgiving holiday. They have a place out by my sister because she is the one that she's the one doing the family unit part right now. My brother is just engaged to be married, so they will be doing it next, but my sister's the one who's ahead. And so we try to go over towards them because the kids are younger. Like, it's hard to travel with kids, especially when they are young enough that, like, God, what's the age? I feel like 8 feels like a good age, but I think people with kids need to tell me, like, what is the age in which the child becomes rational? Like, you can have a rational conversation with them. Not that you can't have conversations with small kids. I mean, small children are very smart. It's just they're learning how to be people still. It's just development, all of that stuff. But so it can be hard to travel with them. So I don't mind heading over there for the Thanksgiving holiday. But so since I had my queen sweetie Susie, who you will meet, don't worry, she's sleeping in her bed right now. And so Susie is a rescue. I started fostering her, I want to say 6 weeks ago, maybe a month ago. And I knew that I wanted to adopt her when I saw her online. I always have known that I wanted a dog. I grew up with a ton of animals. Dogs, cats, horses. I was a horse girl. We had gerbils at one point. I had a rabbit. I had a fish. Like, there was always animals. But I always wanted my own dog. I would love to have like a pack of dogs in the woods. But we're working with what we got. I don't know that I'm quite in the stage of my life where I'm ready to fully isolate in the woods and do that life. I still like being a little bit close to society. But so I also traveled a ton because I've been remote working since, God, what's it, like 2018, 2019. And so being a remote worker, one of the main reasons that I enjoyed it so much is because I could travel so easily. I mean, I'm a single woman, was living on my own at that point, and I have the blessing and curse of having wonderful, wonderful friends all over the country. And so it can be hard for people to travel. And not only do I travel easily, I like traveling. I have a lot of fun doing it. So it totally made sense for me to be traveling around and seeing them. And so I just knew that I didn't have the time or space in my life for a dog. And so everyone was telling me, well, why don't you just get a cat? Like, cats are okay if you leave them alone for a couple of days, or just send someone over to check on them like once a day. And it's not that I don't like cats. I love cats. I helped my brother raise his 2 children, cat children. I want to clarify. They have 4 cats. I love that for them. Anyway, but I just always knew that I wanted a dog, really. And so when I finally decided that I wanted to stop traveling more, I wanted to spend more time, at home in my own space, I just figured it's time for a dog. So I started looking to rescue because I definitely didn't want a puppy. Puppies are a lot of work. Puppies are a 2-person job, I think, at minimum. I mean, they're small beings. They're learning how to be. And they require a lot of care and attention that I don't think, as sole proprietor of my homestead, who's also in charge of the cooking and the cleaning and the bringing home the bacon, the working and all of that I can manage raising a puppy. And there are so many just absolutely wonderful dogs out there that need a good home. And so rescue was just an obvious choice. And so I saw the sweet little Suze's portfolio, little bio on one of the pet finder sites. And the one thing that I noticed on there is they were like, look, she's a very, very sweet girl. She's like a Cocker Spaniel mix. And one of the dogs I grew up with was a Cocker Spaniel King Charles Cavalier mix. And he was just the sweetest boy known to man. I mean, that was just the absolute sweetest dog, a sweet buddy. He truly was a buddy. And so I already knew it's a dog breed that I really liked. Cocker Spaniels. Spaniels tend to be pretty active, love sniffing around, like the whole shebang. And so after looking at her, they had mentioned, like, look, she has some health issues. And so she's really not great around other dogs. She's not great around kids. We're really looking for someone who doesn't have, other pets or children already. Like, she's just not suitable for those households. And I was like, well, that's perfect because I don't have any of those things. So she can just hang out with me, my sweet girl. I just realized that I'm only looking. There we go. I just wanted to see you guys. Anyway, I say see you guys, but really all I can see is myself. But it feels different to think that you're there. Anywho, so I called the rescue. I submitted. I was like, I would like to adopt this dog. And the rescue was so nice. And they were like, hey, we are so excited that you're, excited about her. We want to be very transparent about her health issues and like give you time to foster her, make sure that you feel like you can accept this responsibility. Like, and even if you can't Like just having her out of the shelter for 2 weeks would be fantastic because, I mean, in the shelter, she's surrounded by other animals. And she's not friendly with other dogs. So they had to basically sequester her into her own room. And that's just, you know, that's just a sad life to live. So I brought her home that day, and I think I pretty much knew like immediately. I was like, no, I truly was like, I'll just adopt this dog. And they were like, that's fantastic, but like you can take time to think about it. And I did, because I try to be a logical person when I can. And she's just been the absolute perfect, sweetest baby angel. I love her so much. And anyway, so she is currently tucked up in her bed, being all cozy over there, which is great because she's been a little bit of a Velcro puppy. Again, sweet as can be, but like feels most confident when she knows where I am and can see me. But I think the combination of she knows where I am in the house, she can hear me, means that she's comfortable enough right now to stay in her bed, which I am not going to disturb her from that because I want to encourage that type of behavior. I want to feel like she's comfortable in her own home. Oh my God, wait, I'm so excited. Okay, I have a new fun thing. Look at this thing that I got at Costco. I got a Costco membership. Game changer. But look at this. It's like a full stack of basically like restaurant grade Tupperware, which is perfect because I would just steal these and keep these from delivery orders and stuff. And now I just have a full set. And I have all of my Tupperwares down in this giant drawer down there. It's like a empty bottom chasm. And so that'll be one of the things that I'm doing this weekend is just reorganizing that and making it make sense down there. Actually, quite a few of my projects have to do with the kitchen this weekend, strangely enough, which is very fun for me because I feel like there were some phases in the kitchen for sure. Let me put these away first, and then I can take you on a little tour of the kitchen and show you the things that I did. I just want to get these into a container. I have to say, I did a lot more chatting than chopping, you guys. That took me way too long to chop one onion, but I was just having so much fun talking to you guys about shit. Anywhoozle. Furby Ferb, you missed it. I gave you a call out about needing a photo of your other pup because we were talking about, I'll show you. We have a little run of show over here, a little soup night itinerary, if you will, and Princess Peanut is right on the top. So make sure to send me another photo of your cutie patootie so that I can put her on my fridge because that's what I'm doing with my fridge. Speaking of things that we're doing with the kitchen. Okay, I have those put away. I'm gonna drink some wine. And then the kitchen project. So when I first started with the kitchen, I'm gonna take you on the journey. I started in this little nook right here. I hung these little hooks to hang these coffee mugs from, which, fun fact, I basically never used because I have like a Yeti coffee mug that I use. So these are more for decoration. And this is more like coffee and tea. And then I hung this little hammock guy for bananas and, you know, fruit, whatever. And then I hung up this little basket right here that holds like my root veg. And that was like the main first thing that I did in here. The other thing that I did is, you can't really see it well in this lighting. I want to see if I can. That's a little bit better. But it's basically window cling so that people can't, yeah, I have a light over there because it gets so dark these days. Anyways, so that's like window cling so that light can come through the window, but like people can't see in here. That was like the first step of the kitchen. And then I hung up these shelves. I've got them over the doors. Just because I had those shelves lying around. I got those like years and years ago. I never figured out where to put them. And so finally I just put them up there. And then I hung up these guys, which I got at the Dublin Storehouse when I was in Dublin this year. Just some fun prints that I thought would be fun. But so what I'm doing this weekend is, oh, thank God, she has many photos, you guys. Thankfully, I'm going to need them. Goal state would have this whole thing covered in photos of my friends' pets and my Susie now that I have her. That's the goal state. We need to, that's one of the projects, but we're getting there. But what I want to show you is what I got are these little peel and stick tiles. There's this gal I follow on Instagram, Being the Blooms, I think she's called, but she does a lot of different like peel and stick renter friendly kind of stuff. And so I followed her for years just because that's stuff. Maybe one day I will do something. But so I saw this in her listings and I was thinking, wouldn't it be so cool? My first thought was actually to do, I'm gonna bring you with, there we go. That was on me. That was not on you. I did that. Okay. But so I wanted to do something about this like back wall of my stove. It's just like white and nothing. And so I was like, wait, what if I did like some green tile back there? I'm holding it very gingerly because I did drop a sheet down there. And when I tell you it was not fun to pull out my stove to grab it, I really do mean it. But so I was thinking, what if I did that like up the wall? But then I was like, what if I also did it for my backsplash back here? Oh my God, careful of the wine, Celia. And updated my backsplash like so. And wouldn't that be cute and fun? So I think what I'm gonna do is I have enough to do the backsplash. I did the math to do that because I kind of looked at the shape of back in here. It goes to a point to like lead up to the vent there. I'm just gonna have to do math to figure out how many tiles I need, whereas this backsplash, it's just a rectangular space. I could kind of figure it out pretty easily. So I think I have enough of this to do the backsplash. So I want to do that this weekend and see how I feel about it and if I want to then order more to do back behind here, because I am a little bit concerned that it'll be too much matchy-matchy. And I think that if I just did behind the stove, then you might think it's a little odd that I have this different tile over here that's kind of more blue. Not that they would go poorly together, but just that it wouldn't look cohesive. So I'm gonna attempt the backsplash this weekend. I can already tell I'm gonna have to do some like MacGyvering with a box cutter. So this is gonna take some effort and it's gonna require me to like take everything off the counters and clean it and everything, which is fine because I have wanted to reorganize this just a little bit. I moved like my utensil bowl to the other side of the sink because I thought it'd be nice to have it there for when I'm drying utensils off, because I used to have to like reach over here to do it. But the reality is I want the utensils over here for when I'm cooking, because basically it's I'm turning here for chopping and then turning back over here for cooking. And like that's kind of the motion. Fridge, you know, thinking about the vibe in which we move through our kitchens. So those are my thoughts and plans for the weekend in the kitchen. And I gotta really deep clean mop the floors. I've been doing mopping here and there throughout the house, but I think end of the year is a good time to just give all the floors a good mopping down, clean them all up, make them all shiny and pretty. So between that and my Pilates schedule, I should be fairly busy this weekend. So go me. I'm gonna put this back before I forget it. And is it just about, it's almost 6 o'clock exactly. Look at me go. Well, I only chopped one vegetable. We still have carrots and celery in the sink that are, I just gave them a hose down. I got them at the farmer's market, so they still had a little dirt on them. So I was just cleaning them up, letting them dry off in the colander in the sink. But it is 6 o'clock, and according to our schedule, Susie food. So let us begin our Susie food journey. Let's see if she is even up and about and ready for the Susie food. Okay. So we're going to be doing multiple things during this transaction. You should be able to hear me as I move around because I have this very fancy microphone so that you can hear me. But I might not take you visually with me the whole time. We'll see how this all nets out. I didn't really plan with the concept that I have to be performing for a stream for this part, but it's time to feed Susie. So we gotta feed Susie, okay? Susie doesn't care that I'm live streaming. She just wants her dinners, and I respect that about her. I really do. Okay, I was just cleaning out the bowl. So we start with dry food. I will be right back after that part. The dry food is in the cabinet. Well, it's in the hall closet. And it's not worth dragging it all the way back into zoop. Okay, there's that scoop. Hopefully you heard that badank, the badank of the dry food. Hopefully Susie heard it. Oh, Miss Suzarella. Do you want some food? Is it food time? Yeah. That is the other thing about her. She's not yet at the point where she's like super excited for dinners or anything. So let me see if I can't entice her to join me. Susie Suze, come here, sugar. Should I get some sweet potato? Should we get her some sweet potatoes? See if that's what she wants. I roasted some sweet potato earlier because I'm going to make some sweet potato brownies for myself this week. And I haven't gotten around to it. I roasted it like 2 days ago. So just grab a little chunk of that. Miss Suze, do you want some foods? Do you want some foods, pretty girl? Yeah. What do you think? Well, she liked the sweet potato, but she doesn't seem very encouraged to get up and join us for our dinners. Come on, Suze. Come on, it's dinner time. I swear, she's a little bit of a backwards dog. Not in a bad way at all. As I told my mother, my child is traumatized. We must give her time. But that's okay. We're all a little bit traumatized, Suze. You've just joined the party. Okay. So, I'll keep getting her food ready without her, since she has not deigned to join us yet. But it's essentially, you do half a can of the wet food on top of the scoop of the dry food. Give it a good mix between wet and dry. And then I get a meatball-sized amount, just like a scoop on the spoon. And we start hiding pills inside. Susie, my sweet queen, has liver shunts, which is essentially when the body directs blood around the liver rather than through it to detoxify the blood. And so because there are these various blood vessels that are going around the liver rather than going through it, it raises the ammonia levels in her blood, which then causes a lot of neurological symptoms. And so what we do is we give her a variety of pills to help manage those ammonia levels. But Susie, my sweet child, is a very smart girl. And so, because she is such a smart girl, she can spot the pills in the food and then eat around it and literally just leave the pills by themselves. So we have come up with a solution that she has learned that before she gets her dinners, she has to eat the meatball. And so I make the meatball. Okay. Literally just a meatball of wet food. It feels gross to touch. I will admit that to you. Suze, it's time for the meatball. It's time for the meatball. Do you want some? Yeah, that's a good meatball. Good girl eating her meatball. Okay, apparently I hand deliver food to this dog. What did I do in life that I don't get to be a dog or a cat or a horse? Why do I have to be a human? Humans aren't doing great these days, if you haven't figured that out. But anyway, I get to have my sweet Suze be in my life, so I guess it's worth it. Anyway, this is the last step. On top of not wanting to eat her pills, she doesn't like to get the oral injections in her mouth, so I just squeeze this into her food, and then I give it a mixy mix so that she cannot hide from it. She must eat it because it is in the food. Easy, breezy, beautiful. We give this a good mixeroonie. And then I think she'll just get to this when she's ready, which I'm okay with for right now. You are aware that your food is prepared, Miss Ma'am? Would you like any? Would you like any of your foods? Yes? Would you like any? Okay. She is much too satisfied to be curled up in her little bed. So, okay. Goodbye, my Furby Ferb. Thank you so much for joining me. I will send you some photos of this. I've already sent you photos of this, but I will send you some videos because you didn't get to see her in the stream, which honestly, I understand now why stage parents are the way that they are, because my stage child didn't show up for her appointment. Let's go. Anyway, have a good night, my dear. I love you. Okay. We've done the Susie food time. I still got time before we talk about Mack being back. So why don't I finish doing my chaperones? That took me forever and 47 days because I was too busy chit-chatting. But I did call it Chop and Chat for a reason. That is for sure. Ooh, I have to sneeze. No one tells you what to do when you have to sneeze on a stream. I pulled the microphone away so I wasn't sneezing at you, but is there anything to do besides that? I don't know. Okay, what do I got here? I got a lot of celery. Actually, probably more celery than I'm going to need, which is fine. Let's figure out what I'm gonna work with. I like these. I like this one. I'll save these 3 for a later purpose. I'll start with these. All right. Let the fun begin. All right, bringing you back into the business. Let's do those chippy choppies. Yeah, no, but Susie was such a good girl in the car ride. She was a little nervous about being in the new place with the new people and everything, but she warmed up to everyone. She was really a good girl considering how much I changed her life up. She's still a bit surprised by the life that she has wound up in. And I get it, girl. I'm also surprised by the challenges that life throws at me sometimes. Life moves in wild ways, let me say. But yeah, so it was a good Thanksgiving overall. And choppy, 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 choppy. Do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do. There we go. And more chopping. I feel like, what if this is half of the fun of soup night. I've been doing soup night, not here, obviously, but like soup night's just something that I do. Origin of soup night, actually. That's a fun topic of conversation. So, how soup night came to be. I really enjoy batch making things. I've lived primarily by myself since my very early 20s. So, I've spent quite a few years managing my own household and dealing with, you know, what am I going to make for the meal, because that's what I'm in charge of. And so I do like to do a lot of large batches of food and eat it throughout the week, because I am not someone who needs a ton of variety. I will eat the same soup for 5 days in a row. I don't care. And so there is a farmer's market that I really like to go to that is on Thursdays. And so I would go on Thursdays and I would get just some veg. It was like, you know, the first couple of times I didn't really know what I was going to shop for. I just kind of wanted to explore and, you know, test things out. And I got it in my head that I wanted to make a chicken tortellini soup, because if I can put tortellini in something, I might as well put tortellini in something. Tortellini is delicious. And so I got the veg that I needed from the farmer's market, and I came back and I made the stock, and then I made the soup. And I really liked it. It's a delicious soup. So why not? Crunchy. That was actually a very nice crunchy celery. But anyway, so I started making it like a little ritual for myself, that Thursdays I would make my soup, and then I would have my soup for Thursday night dinner, and then Friday, so that I didn't really have to worry while I was working during the day, like, oh, what am I going to eat? I have soup I can heat up, easy peasy. And throughout the weekend, if I don't have plans, I'm not super worried about, you know, what am I going to make? And typically, when I make my soup Thursday night, if I'm the only one eating the soup, it'll be gone by Tuesday. So I'll just eat it throughout, you know, the next few days whenever I feel like it. But so, as friends started asking me, like, oh, do you want to hang out on Thursday? I started being like, well, Thursday is soup night. Because in my head, like, Thursday is soup night now. Like, that was just something I accept. I'm like, Thursday is soup night now. So I'd be like, oh, it's soup night. And they're like, what's that mean? That's a collection of words that has no significance to me. And so I was like, well, I make soup. Like, that's the night I make soup. That is soup night. So I had friends start swinging by on Thursday nights, because they knew that Thursday night was soup night. And if they didn't have anything else to do, they know it's still soup night, that they can swing by my place and I will have, you know, soup ready, because it do be soup night. And so, you know, I don't usually get a ton of visitors. I would say maybe once or twice a month. So like every other. So if you want to join soup night, you can join soup night, and then people feel more comfortable just like swinging by. I would say of the people who attend soup night, it's a solid 50-50, like people who drop in and people who will text beforehand. But typically my drop-ins come later. Like they'll come more around like 9 to 10, because I am a night owl. I am happy to stay up late. So actually most of the time, this soup is technically it is named a midnight soup. And that is because, well, it's just chicken noodle soup but with cheese tortellini, and that's kind of a mouthful. And so my friend who came over late, I was like, well, I'm still making the soup, because I made the stock and then I was letting like the fat settle so that I could skim it off. And then I just wasn't getting around to actually making the soup until like 11 o'clock at night, because I'll stay up late. I don't mind eating soup at midnight. That doesn't bother me. And so it was named Midnight Soup because it was ready at midnight. So that is the origin of midnight soup. And that is the origin of soup night. It's just essentially the night where I make soup. And so I kind of like this idea of like letting you guys in on the soup night prep, because I'm going to be doing this regardless. Like, we're going to be doing soup night. This is part of doing soup night. Oh, I forgot to cut the tops and the bottoms off this carrot. Let's give it to Susie, shall we? She likes to munch on a good carrot. She doesn't really know how to eat it, but she likes to like munch on it. So we'll donate this to Susie. Susie, would you like a carrot? feel like I'm just bringing like offerings of treasure to the sleeping giant in her domain, even though she's really not that big. She's like 30 pounds or so. She's definitely underweight. So that's part of why I'm trying to kind of let her eat at her own pace, but at the same time, I do want her to eat, you know? Okay. Thinking about carrot parts. Let's do these to start, and if I need more, I will get more. Okay. All right. I think I'm just gonna chop all of these down first, and then do the chopping. It's amazing how much faster chopping goes when you're not chatting. But then where's the fun in that? Chopping in silence? The thing is, when I'm not chatting out loud, I am chatting in my head. My brain is never quiet. So there's always some sort of conversation going on. There we go. Chippity chop, chop, chop. Yeah, but so this is kind of fun. So I think I might keep doing this little soup night thing. Should I figure out how to actually like live stream? Because this could be like cool and fun if I put thought into it, I guess. Of like, honestly, I think my first step is watching some streams. I don't watch a ton of streamed content, which feels odd if I say that I'm going to start streaming more. I feel like I should have a baseline as to what streaming is like. I know that a lot of streaming is like gaming based. The only streaming that I've really watched is actually like, I would say cut downs of Let's Plays. You know what I mean? I guess, well, that's what the genre was called back when I was watching it in like high school or something. I don't know if that's what they still call it. I would assume so. Like, that's just makes sense. But yeah, maybe I could stream this like, because I have other social things. Can't you like stream across? I have to do research is the thing. Maybe I have to look at my Rolodex, see if I have a friend who knows how to do this kind of stuff. All right. We are definitely a little bit over reduced. I'm going to turn the heat down. I might add a little bit more water back in. That's kind of the thing though. Like if you over, just add water. Like cooking is much more forgiving than baking. That's kind of like a known thing. Which is why I tend to be a little bit more relaxed while cooking in the kitchen, because there's pretty much always a way to fix up whatever you made a mistake of. But once your bake goes in the oven, it's kind of like you're gonna get what you're gonna get. That's another thing that I need to figure out is, so for the holidays, I want to say for like the last 4 years, maybe going on 5 years, I've been sending out some holiday treat boxes to friends who live out of town, of just some of like my main holiday staples. Every year growing up, my mom would make chocolate covered pretzels as like the school gifts that you would like give to all the teachers and whatnot, and like to the neighbors and everything. And so I just always associate chocolate covered pretzels with the holidays, because it was always a production to like get them made, because we would help, obviously, and you get to drizzle the chocolate on. And we lived in the Midwest, so you could just put the pretzels outside on the porch to freeze, or in the garage, because it was cold enough out there. It's not cold enough here. I would still have to, I put them in my freezer. So it's a little bit slower going for me to make them, because I need to make sure that there's enough room in there. But they freeze up pretty quick. It's really just to help set the chocolate. But anyway, the point being, I've been making treat gift boxes, and so I need to make them for my usual group that I make them, but I wanted to add more people onto my list, and so I need to map out what I'm going to make. I think what I want to make this year, so the staples are I always send chocolate covered pretzels, because those are the holiday treat. And I also send my chocolate chip cookies, because they are essentially the crowd favorite. It's like the baked good that I'm best known for. Others that I've included in the past are, I like to do a soft gingerbread cookie. So rather than like the crunchy biscuit style that you would associate with like a gingerbread man or a gingerbread house, it's more of like a soft bake with that gingerbread flavor, which I really like. And so I want to do those again. And I've been looking at doing, I want to do like a cream cheese cookie with like a raspberry, like kind of like a jam cookie, like those thumbprint jam cookies where like there's like a little well of jam in the center. I want to do that with like cream cheese and raspberry because I love raspberries. And then in the past, I have sent my sweet potato brownies just because I got a request from one of my friends of like lower sugar, like lower glycemic index treats. And so that, yeah, I'm definitely gonna add some more water in there. So that really quick. And so the sweet potato brownies were kind of what I came up with there, just because it's more of a natural sugar. You don't have to add nearly as much cane sugar or anything like that in that recipe because you get the natural sugars of the sweet potato. Yeah, that should be good enough. Perfect. And so I might play around with that recipe and include it, but I'm not 100% sure. Again, I'm noodling on it. But so I have like a whole stack. That's a closet back there. I've got like, actually, let me show you my stack of boxes. I've been saving, I save boxes throughout the year where I'm like, oh yeah, like that'll be a good box to use for shipping. I could literally, I was trying to show you and they all fell apart in my hands, but I've got like a stack of boxes in there from throughout the year of like sized for gift, like cookie gifts. So I need to figure out how many boxes I have and figure out my list. And so maybe that might be fun to do as I have enough of all my chopped ingredients, don't I? Aha! Look at that, I have enough of all my chopped ingredients. We did the chopping and the chatting. So that could be a fun thing to put on the to-do list for a future soup night, because I can't make the same soup every single, I mean, I'm going to every single week, but that doesn't mean that's what we have to focus on every single week if you're going to hang out with me. So that could be fun. We could make the chocolate covered pretzels one of the days. That'd be fun to do together. Okay. Honestly, I want to take a little seat and chat about Allison Mack. So I'm going to grab myself a chair. One thing that we have learned from a past stream is that my connection does not do well outside of the kitchen, which seems honestly a little rude, but such is life. Okay, I've got wine. I've got water. Ooh. Now that I'm seated, it's a whole different ball game. You know what? So I'm going to turn off the light back there, and then we'll stay seated because this is just, I don't want to stand anymore. I'm going to be so honest with you. I've been standing for basically an hour walking around. Okay. So, no. Okay, you're still there. Hold on. There we go. You're connected very precariously to my laptop, so sometimes it's not quite sure what to do with you. Okay, I'm going to turn down the Christmas music. As much fun as it is for me, we have to focus on Allison Mack is back. So, if you're coming into this discussion by me talking at you with no context, the 30-second version of what you need to know is that Allison Mack is an actress who was on a very well-known TV show called Smallville back in the 2000s on the CW network. And so she was I would say a fairly well-known, famous television actress. And she became involved with a self-help group called NXIVM through their, I believe she took a gymnast training first. Essentially, NXIVM is the larger organization, and within the organizations, there were different sub-organizations, the main one being executive success programs. That's how most people found the ecosystem, if you will. No different from, say, they were kind of trying to position it as they were an organization of learning. And so there were different paths that you could go down to find self-actualization. So, for example, Jeunesse was a women's only training to talk about, what it is to be a woman. There was a men's group called Society of Protectors, SOP. There was, a yoga kind of influenced fitness class called XOSO. They had a singing group. So there were a variety of different ways to get involved in the community that was NXIVM. Most people took a training via executive success programs, and they had different 5-day, 10-day, 16-day trainings that you could do of the curriculum, and they were very expensive, thousands of dollars for each. And they promised basically the science of joy, teaching people how to understand their emotions better, to then, unlock their limiting beliefs and live their best life possible. The reality of it, basically think if Scientology didn't say that it was a religion and instead said that it was a scientific endeavor, kind of that sort of vibe. And so within NXIVM, because the leader of NXIVM, this guy named Keith Raniere, is essentially a narcissistic sociopath. And the entire point of his inner circle was just to provide him with adoration and with sex with the women that surrounded him in the organization. And so as the first wave of women aged out during the creation and solidification of the NXIVM company, the next wave of women were coming up, and he involved them in a sorority-style group called DOS. This is not a 30-second version of this story, but I just started talking, so we're just going to keep going with it. Anyway. So, within DOS was literally a master-slave agreement where, if we use the sorority language of bigs and littles, your big is in charge of your growth, is in charge of everything that you do. So you have to ask permission from your master to do anything. Obviously, this is rife for exploitation. Keith was exploiting these women and victimizing them through the coercion of sexual favors in trying to state that it's for their own personal development. And Allison Mack, who had been involved in this NXIVM community for, I believe, a decade at that point, got involved in this DOS group and ended up committing crimes in which she participated in the sexual trafficking of women for Keith's pleasure. And so Allison pleaded guilty and was sentenced to, I believe, 3 years in jail with an additional 3 years probation, but I don't want to hard quote those numbers. Allison Mack is now out of jail. She's been out for a couple of years now, and she partnered up with CBC for a new season of their Uncover podcast called, I was just listening to it. It is called Allison After NXIVM. It's a 7-part series in which they go into basically Allison's story within NXIVM, because the way that Keith Raniere is in prison for life. I think he got 125 years in jail. Sarah Bronfman, one of the Bronfman sisters of the Seagram's liquor fame, was also jailed for, I believe, 6 years. I think that her jail time is coming up as well. Allison was jailed Nancy Salzman, who was the second in command and the leader of curriculum, the prefect, was jailed for, I believe, 2 years, definitely over a year. And I believe one other individual was jailed, primarily the accountant who was in charge of everything. I'm not going to state her name just because she hasn't been in the public as much. The rest of them kind of, if you look up NXIVM, if you've watched any of this cult has been documented and profiled extensively. There was a 2-season documentary series called The Vow on HBO that outlined the cult, and then they were actually able to get footage of the cult disintegrating when Keith was arrested in Mexico and extradited to the U.S. because he was brought up on essentially a RICO indictment in New York for his crimes. The New York prosecutor took the mafia route of charging these people with racketeering and conspiracy and all of that, and tax evasion to get charges laid against them. Of course, there were also charges of pedophilia and child pornography for Keith Raniere as well, because he is a gross individual. But mainly the rest of the group was either charged with tax evasion or visa evasion, because they helped. There is a very large Mexico cohort of this organization, and so members from Mexico would come up without proper documentation. They were helping them stay in the country, past visas, things of that nature. And then some of them were brought up on these sexual trafficking charges from their involvement with DOS. And I think that can be somewhat confusing for people who aren't well versed in kind of what happened in this situation. Is the reality is there were crimes happening on multiple levels of multiple severity, which is very common in cult structures like this. It's very rare that any individual besides the leader has a full picture as to what's going on. And you hear that throughout different conversations that members, even high-ranking members who were involved in these crimes, state. Allison herself, in this podcast series, which is fully released on the CBC's YouTube channel. I'm also listening to it on Spotify. I've listened to it through twice now. And on Spotify, they're still releasing episodes weekly. I think they're up to episode 5. But all 7 episodes are up on the CBC's YouTube channel, and I would imagine on their own sites. But that's how I originally listened to it when I found out that it was released. Additionally, Allison Mack went on her previous Co-Stars podcast, which I want to... make sure that I get the name of it correct. So I want to see if I can find it by just... it's the Inside of You podcast with Michael Rosenbaum. Michael Rosenbaum played Lex Luthor on Smallville, that CW TV show that Allison was most known for. She did an episode of his podcast talking about her experience because, as she states in the podcast, Michael reached out to her once it became evident that she had been released from custody and was living as she is, I believe, still on probation. She is not completely a free woman, but she is out on her probation. She has stated that she is attending college and she is studying psychology, which is a conversation that we can get into. And she also got married. She met a man, Frank, in a dog park. And Frank also left a high control group. Frank was a part of a white supremacist movement and was jailed for kidnapping and fully deconstructed and deprogrammed his, I don't want to say fully, because that's the type of, but deprogram his racist beliefs, which when you are in a situation of that nature when you're in a high control group of that nature, deprogramming and deconstructing the thought patterns and beliefs that were provided to you is like a lifelong endeavor. Like those thoughts are always going to be there. I would liken it to similar to any sort of trauma or mental health. I know individuals with eating disorders have reported that like the eating disorder itself like doesn't go away. Like those thoughts can still be present. Those disordered thoughts can still be intrusive thoughts. So like you're always kind of catching yourself and redirecting your thought patterns. That's going to be like a lifelong endeavor. But so he has rehabilitated and now does advocacy work against everything that he used to believe in, which is fantastic. Allison is working herself to deprogram everything that she was taught to believe within NXIVM, which again, lifelong endeavor. But she states in this podcast, because I think what was most interesting about the announcement of the podcast is we had not yet heard from Allison. So the way that this cult came to be in the public eye, and I want to say the larger public, because so the cult was based in a suburb outside of Albany, New York. And Albany in and of itself, I believe, was fairly aware of this group's existence. And it's kind of, the local cult. If you've ever lived in a town where like you have a group of people where you're like, yeah, they're the kind of weirdos, but like we just kind of let them do what they're doing over there. In an attempt of tolerance. However, there were reports for years of Keith's sexual predation against underage girls. And there have been a variety of stories that were released about the way that he would manipulate these young girls and, lead them to suicide, or there are some questionable deaths. There are some rumors of him poisoning women in his life to give them cancer. There's a lot of interesting stories buried underneath this cult, which again harkens back directly to the overall status quo that like in the cult, no one's going to know everything that's going on except for the leader of the cult. And that's by design. I mean, information control is one of the main tenets of the BITE model for a reason. The BITE model, if you're not aware, is Stephen Hassan's theory of control exerted by these high control groups, these cults. The BITE model stands for behavioral control, information control, thought control, and I believe it's emotional control, if I'm not mistaken. But that information control is absolutely paramount. It's very important that in a cult, you limit the amount of information that any one member gets, and that if they do get any information, that it is seen only through the cult leader's lens to teach them how that they are meant to be in this world. And it's so necessary because when you are living in this type of environment, you have to subscribe to the collective delusion, essentially. A cult essentially starts as an individual or group of individuals who have decided to live by a shared delusion. And in order to be a part of the cult, you also have to subscribe to this shared delusion. And I call it a delusion because it's not based in reality. The cult thrive. The reason it's a cult, in my perspective, based on the reading and research that I've done, is that a cult will convince its members to act against their own self-interest in service of the cult leader, in service of the cult leader, not necessarily the cult, but the cult leader themselves. And it is very against human biology and instinct to go against your own self-interest. I mean, thinking of like your body does not want to die. Like your body will try to tell you if something is wrong. It's going to give you hunger cues if you're hungry. It's going to give you the thirst cues if you're thirsty. It's going to tell you to go to sleep if you're tired. your body wants to survive. And so your mind and your thoughts tend to be wired towards that to then give you those signals from your body, from your being like, hey, we need these things to survive. Like we are trying to act in our own self-interest. And having an individual be able to convince you to act against your own self-interest, but then convince you that it's within your own interest to act against your own self-interest is one of the most insidious things that cults do. Because if you take away those natural, I struggle saying natural biological urges. I want to say something more akin to, if you take away someone's gut instincts, I think is the way that a lot of cult survivors have described it, of like no longer trusting your gut. You're trusting the cult leader to tell you what to think and believe rather than trusting your own gut, your own intuition, the information within your own body and being, however you so categorize it. You're going to trust someone else over trusting yourself. And that can be incredibly damaging to an individual. That severing of trust from who they are as an individual and then relinquishing it to another individual. It's a deeply, deeply vulnerable place to be. And it makes sense then why it is so hard for people to leave these high control groups, because for you to have to come to the realization that your entire life is a lie because you have entrusted your rational thought to someone else who told you that they knew the best, that they knew how it should be done, that if you put your trust in them, you will be okay, you will have the life that you want, is incredibly devastating. And of all the things that Allison brings up in the podcast, I think that to get into the review of the podcast itself, it is very narrative journalism. So if you're not prepared for the host to kind of like tell you a story from their perspective, with it being interlaced with interviews with Allison Mack as she kind of talks you through, because we start with Allison Mack explaining like, this is how I grew up, and this is how I ended up, being an actress, and this is how I ended up in Vancouver, and this is how I found out about NXIVM, this is how I ended up with NXIVM. Like, she takes you through that whole process. And a lot of it is things that individuals who have followed NXIVM and the trial and everything will be familiar with or aware of. A lot of these details did come out during trial because, as is explained throughout the podcast, Allison Mack did end up pleading guilty and then entering a process called proffering, which is when the defendant works with, is she a defendant in this case? I don't know enough of the legal jargon. She was accused of a crime, she committed guilty to it, and then in order to hopefully take time off of her sentence, she worked with the prosecution to provide them details against Keith Raniere, who had not pleaded guilty. Keith Raniere did go to trial and was convicted of his crimes, but he did not plead guilty, whereas the rest of the individuals on the original indictment with him, including Allison Mack, Lauren Salzman, Nancy Salzman, Claire Bronfman, and a few others, did plead guilty. I believe that, you know what, I'm just going to say, based on this podcast, my understanding is that Lauren proffered with the prosecution, and so did Allison. But in that process of proffering, the prosecution then obviously uses that information within their trial. So all the trial transcripts are readily found on the internet, because this is a pretty well-known case in the cultiverse, if you will. You can look on Reddit and find everything. Also, I know that there are a myriad of different local reporters who are very invested in this subject, as well as cult experts in this field who have a variety of resources and compendiums of documentation on these types of things. So the transcripts are very easy to find if you want to find them. And additionally, there are multiple episodes of season 2 of The Vow that dig into the trial itself. And you also speak, the documentarians of The Vow spoke with both the prosecutor and Keith's defense attorney throughout the trial. And that footage is in there as well. So they have incredible access in this case. So a lot of this information is well known. I will say, if you decide to watch The Vow, if you haven't watched it before, throughout season 1, season 2, there are going to be a bunch of like trigger warnings in general. There is an episode in season 2 about a young woman named Daniela, who is held essentially captive in a home for 2 years. And I say home, she was kept in a room with like a mattress on the floor for 2 years. And that episode is incredibly difficult to watch and listen to. I always just give that caveat when I'm recommending it to people. This is a very hard case to get through in a lot of respects. And it just speaks to the devastation of cults in general. But so a lot of this information was revealed previously. What is incredibly fascinating about this podcast is we do also hear from Lauren Salzman. That starts in episode 4. And I was shocked when I heard Lauren, because Lauren had not spoken publicly either. There were a variety of individuals within NXIVM and who had left NXIVM or were still a part of it, who had been a part of the different documentaries or had done their own podcasts or had done their own books, things of that nature. But we had never heard from Allison Mack and we had never heard from Lauren Salzman, and we hear from both of them in this podcast. So that in and of itself is newsworthy in this story. Additionally, Allison says in the podcast that the reason she decided to do it is because she felt like there were a lot of misconceptions as to who she is as a person in the public eye out of this case, and that it really weighs on her. This is me paraphrasing, by the way. If you want things directly from her, listen to the podcast. It is her voice. You know, she is interviewed throughout it. But she speaks to how there is a version of her in the public consciousness that isn't accurate, and how painful that is to her, especially when it comes to the sexual aspects of this case, because she was charged with sexual trafficking. Essentially, what that charge relates to is in this sorority, if you want to call it that, this DOS group. Keith was at the head, and he had a group of, I want to say, 6 to 8 women who were, we'll call them like the first line slaves, the first line masters. They held their fealty to Keith. Keith was their master. And it was a recruitment style similar to multi-level marketing, which I always find so funny. Multi-level marketing, it has also been colloquially called like commercial cults, which I personally completely agree with. A multi-level marketing is just not a viable business structure. It truly, you just get the majority of your sales from your own contractors who are supposed to be selling your products. It's a scam. It's fine. But so Keith was actually known for, when I tell you, so Keith started, before he did this cult thing, he did a multi-level marketing scheme called Consumer's Byline. The whole point of it essentially being like the MLM version of a Costco. So the concept is you recruit people to be part of this purchasing group so that you can buy in bulk to get better deals from retailers, from wholesalers. So essentially, instead of paying for like a Costco or a Sam's Club membership, you would sign up with another Consumer's Byline distributor, and then you would try to recruit other people to join this pyramid scheme. And I know way too much about multi-level marketing, so we're just going to dig into that for a little bit. So in the United States, it is incredibly difficult to actually end up being called a pyramid scheme if you're in multi-level marketing. The direct sales organization, the DSA, is a lobbying group that has worked very, very hard in Washington to minimize any restrictions against MLMs. And there is a very infamous meeting called the Amway Accords, if you will. Essentially, the heads of Amway, which is a long known and standing MLM based out of like the Michigan area. The fun point that people like to point to is that Betsy DeVos, the former Department of Education, rest in peace, to the Department of Education. Betsy DeVos, I believe, is still alive, but the Department of Education, I believe, is dead now. But so the DeVos family that she married into is actually one of, I believe, the founding family, if not one of the founding families of Amway. But there is an old Amway Accords where, a couple of people from Amway went into the Oval Office, had a discussion with the president, and then we came out with the Amway Accords that just completely took the sales out, the wind out of the sails of the FTC, who up to that point had been trying to and succeeding in prosecuting multi-level marketing as pyramid schemes. This was back in, I want to say, 60s and 70s. This was back a while ago. This whole story, now that I'm thinking about it, it's another podcast that I listened to, The Dream. I feel like it was something called like The Dream Podcast. Yes, it's called The Dream. And the first season of The Dream, they actually, when I say they, I mean the, I'm trying to see if I can find more details on here. No, but if I think to, I will put some in the description. But so the host of The Dream, the podcast, works with another woman, and that woman actually signs up for a multi-level marketing scheme so that they can kind of prove on the ground that, like, hey, these things don't work. Essentially, it's a pyramid scheme in the sense of if you sign up early enough in a multi-level marketing scheme, you then can recruit enough people in your downline so that you can make a significant amount of money. However, the people further and further and further down the downline, there is a finite amount of people who are willing to sign up for these types of schemes. Not only like are willing to, but also are able to. If you have to consider that you have to be, over 18 years of age, and have the money to sign up, and have an interest in the product, yada, yada, yada. There's a finite amount of people who can sign up for this. And the primary way that you make money in multi-level marketing is through recruitment and not through sale of the product. But so Amway decision, the Amway Accords, however we frame it, basically set up these rules of the road, if you will, of how multi-level marketing can operate legally within the United States. And they have a couple of different things that they have to abide by in terms of sales to a final end consumer. The point being, the advocates of multi-level marketing have made it so that it is actually incredibly difficult for companies to be accused of fraud while working as a multi-level marketing company. And Keith Raniere ended up getting sued by like multiple different attorneys of various states, basically saying that they were defrauding their citizens. And Keith was banned from ever running another company, essentially, was what ended up there. I mean, that fucking idiot. If you can't even keep a multi-level marketing scheme together in a country that basically supports them, just crazy. But so the DOS organization ended up being structured similarly to how you would consider a multi-level marketing company. And NXIVM in and of itself was structured that way. They had this whole like coaching tier system. It was supposed to be based off of like judo belts, because he was a judo champion in like elementary school or whatever. Who cares? And so there was like this SASH system of depending on how fully integrated you were is the terminology that they used. However much training you had done, you got, a better and better color of sash to signify your standing in the organization. And so part of rising in the ranks of NXIVM of this coaching program is to recruit other people to take the course. And you would then get the sales commission off of anyone who you enrolled. And that was a lifestyle path that they promoted within their organization to make money off of. And that was based off of multi-level marketing as well, like 100%. They say that it wasn't, but like it very clearly was. That was basically the model that Keith was most comfortable with. And so within the MLM structure of this DOS group, which is the sorority where these women were slaves to Keith, the ultimate master of this group, part of their requirements was to recruit more slaves. This is the actual terminology they use, by the way, master and slave. So it was part of the women's job to recruit more slaves to bring into this organization. And once these women were brought into the organization, it was alleged and then proven in court that the goal was then to get these women more and more, I don't want to say the word comfortable, because it wasn't about the women's comfort. It was about dissociating them from reality enough through starvation and through self-punishment and through these methods that were supposed to provide them with the tools to live a better life, or whatever it is that he claimed that he was selling. Instead, it was just a variety of behavioral control techniques to then strip their agency away, so that when it got to the point that the women were given an assignment to seduce Keith, with the outcome of being that Keith would have sex with these women. And so Allison, it was proven throughout the trial, through various emails and her own testimony, not in court. She did not testify in court, but through her own guilty plea, that she did direct women to seduce Keith, which then qualified for this sexual trafficking charge. And that was the primary crime that she was charged with. That was the real rub, if you will. And as you listen to her throughout the podcast, it is clear that she has had a lot of really unfortunate relationships and trauma throughout her own life that she had not processed, and it left her vulnerable. And her vulnerability was then exploited because she truly did, I think, believe the best in these people. She really did want to believe that they had their best interest at heart, and took them at their word for what, and I say they, and I mean primarily Keith, but this was a larger con that was propagated by other cult members. And this is where it gets so messy on this idea of perfect victimhood. I saw so many comments as I was listening to the podcast on the YouTube channel for CBC, of people being so incredibly unempathetic towards her, and basically saying, like, that they weren't going to listen to this drivel, which I don't understand the point of commenting things like that. It's like, you don't have to. You can just click another video. Like, you don't have to listen to it if you don't want to. And it's disheartening to see so many unempathetic responses to this, because I do truly believe that Allison is trying to make amends. I don't know that she has fully processed her experience, and I think that's also very fair, considering she hasn't even been out for nearly as long as she was in. She was in a part of this organization for, I believe the number of years was 12 years total. And if you consider that she was not like none of this blew up until I want to say 2019, 2020. It was definitely around the pandemic that time. It's been 5-6 years. I'll give you, it's been 5-6 years at most, I will give you, that all of this blew up. And she was then removed from this environment. Because after Keith was arrested by Mexican authorities and then extradited to Texas, where he was then charged and then transferred up to New York, she was fully enmeshed in this community. This community was her entire life. Like this is what she did for 12 years of her life. And so to say she's only been out of it once he was arrested, and then she was arrested, I want to say within weeks of that for her own charges. She was released on bail. And this is actually one of the more interesting parts of the podcast, is hearing from Allison's mother. And Allison's mother states, we got Allison out on bail. Her bail was $5 million. Allison at this point was broke, which, considering she was a television actress, I mean, she was like a top 3 bill television actress in a very well-known TV show. I think she stated at some point that she was making like $40,000 an episode or something like that. I worry that I'm pulling that figure out of my ass, but I believe on one of the podcasts she stated something to that effect of like tens of thousands of dollars per episode. And, she had a business manager and people to manage this money. She gave all of her money to this cult to pay for more courses and pay to live in Albany and all of this. I mean, she states in this, she's like, I gave the last of my money to a lawyer to deal with this. So when she ends up in jail with a $5 million bail bond, her mother basically has to put up all of the family's assets and still be short $2 million. And so her mother states, I, being Allison's mother, was so worried that Allison was still under Keith's thrall, that if she was released on bail, that like she would do whatever Keith told her to. So like if Keith tells her to run, like she would run. And her mother was like, look, I'm putting our livelihoods up for this. I need to make sure that Allison understands that like it's no, you don't get to talk to him anymore. And I think hearing from Allison's mother was incredibly interesting, because she talks a little bit about how Allison was throughout the process. And that can be one of the hardest parts when dealing with victims of cults, is their immediate circle, the family, the friends who are not involved in the community that they get sucked into, who are watching this from the outside. Because if we get back to that delusion state that I was talking about, if you have to exist within this delusion to be a part of the cult, people who are looking from the outside in aren't part of that delusion as well. They are looking from the lens of reality, essentially. And so to be a loved one looking through the lens of reality at this delusional state that your loved one is in can be very jarring and upsetting. And how do you deal with it? And the reality of that is, the two main ways to deal with it is either they wake up themselves, or there is some sort of event that happens that removes them from that situation. And for Allison, it was being charged with this crime, and then her mother sending her a letter in jail being like, hey, we'll post the bail for you, but I'm worried if we do that you're going to pick him over us. And I can't put our lives on the line if you're just going to pick your cult leader over your family. And so Allison communicated back through her lawyers that if her parents posted her bond, she would go back home with them and stay with them. And she wouldn't have any communication. I don't think she was legally allowed to have any communication with anyone in NXIVM during this time. I'm not sure if she's able to, at this point, have any communication. I believe part of her probation, she mentioned, is that she can't communicate with some people. But she had to essentially go cold turkey on this entire community that she had. She was not allowed to talk to any of them. She was not allowed to be involved with it. All the meanwhile, she's now spending time with her family again, who are firmly placed in reality, having to deal with their daughter's delusion falling apart in front of her. And Allison speaks a lot about, that cognitive dissonance that she had to go through that really wrecked her. Lauren speaks of the exact same thing in her parts, and hearing from Lauren was very, very interesting. Lauren is a very interesting figure in the larger conversation of NXIVM because she is one of the daughters of Nancy Salzman. Nancy Salzman was the right-hand woman, if you will, to Keith Raniere when Keith decided that he wanted to create this sort of NXIVM program. He originally approached Nancy Salzman to do so because he wanted to utilize Nancy's credibility as an NLP practitioner, neuro-linguistic programming. Their initial goal was to pitch it to like Fortune 500 companies, kind of more of like, you know, an executive learning program. And the feedback that they got from executives was like, hey, Nancy, we love you, but like, he's a fucking weirdo. Like, do this without him. And Nancy was within Keith's thrall at this point, and so she wanted to build it with him because Keith was the one who held all of the secrets in his head of the universe, and she was just the one who was taking the wisdom and creating these trainings out of it. So Nancy was really the educational arm of this community that they were building. Lauren is Nancy's daughter. And so as they are creating this company, Lauren is in college. So when Lauren graduates, she is then kind of like immediately brought into the company. I believe her mother told her, I think Nancy is the one who says this in the docuseries, The Vow, because we hear from Nancy in season 2, which is incredibly impactful. Nancy says that she had told Lauren, you know, if you dedicate like a certain amount of time to doing the NXIVM courses, I will support you in whatever you decide to do with your life. But like, do this first. And Lauren just gets sucked in because Keith, you know, starts hitting on her and starts an affair with her and starts promising her, you know, children and like the whole life that Lauren had wanted. And the judge in the case seemed to really have a lot of compassion and empathy for Lauren in this situation. There was a lot of conversation about how, you know, it's unlikely that Lauren was able to make a consenting decision to join this type of organization because of the way she was brought in. It's very similar to how I would say children of cult members tend to talk about their former cults. Because the children didn't have a choice. They were born into this situation. Lauren is kind of similar in that context of Lauren was kind of born into this, not as a child, but in this very vulnerable time between, you know, the stages of adulthood. And getting to hear Lauren's perspective of what happened and hear things through her lens is incredibly interesting, incredibly impactful. I think a lot of people feel for Lauren more than they feel for other victims in this case. And I have an understanding towards that. However, there is no such thing as a perfect victim in these types of cases because, as we see a lot in multi-level marketing schemes, the victim becomes the victimizer. And that is just the nature of these types of organizations is if you're going to continue to bring people into this fold, you are going to do unto them what was done unto you. And so a lot of the abuses that were perpetuated onto you during this process are then normalized. And it's treated as this is a normal way to treat others. This is how we treat people in our community, in our society. And so it would make sense to treat new people that way. And it would make sense to act that way towards others. Again, this is a constructed delusion that everyone's in. We can look at it from the outside and say, those things are wrong, we should not be doing that. But in order to exist in these cults, you have to subscribe to the cult leader's delusion. Otherwise, you wouldn't be there. Just factually. When people are like, why would you ever join that? Like, obviously you wouldn't join that. You're not in the shared delusion. Like, you don't see it the way that they see it. You don't see it through the indoctrination lens that they see it in. So I think that this podcast does a great job of kind of showing Allison's side of things. And I hope that it gives her the voice that she was hoping to get, because I do know that a lot of the negative publicity about her, especially in terms of the sexual nature of things, was deeply damaging to her. She speaks about that a lot. I don't want to say a lot. She does speak towards that on the podcast. And the podcast that she did with Michael Rosenbaum was also very interesting. They get a bit more into the industry, because they both worked in the entertainment industry, and kind of discussing things from that lens. Overall, I think we did learn a couple of new things about it. I took a couple of notes of like things that like I hadn't heard before. I'm trying to see if there's anything super major that I want to bring up. I will say, so everyone was wondering what was the thing that caused Lauren to flip, because in the original indictment, that core group was all indicted together along with Keith. Keith ended up standing trial alone because the rest of the women who were indicted with him ended up taking plea deals and pleading out guilty. Lauren was the first one to flip, and Lauren speaks to why she made, like, what caused her to wake up. And it ended up being, which we kind of knew through her testimony, but when Keith was captured by Mexican authorities, Lauren was in the room with him trying to protect him, and Keith was trying to protect himself. And Lauren started having that realization of, like, he's not the man that he says he is. And so she said that when she was on house arrest, she read through all of the court documents that were being submitted as part of this court case. And she said, I spent like 3 months just reading everything that was being alleged. And that information then kind of woke up a part of her brain that had been telling her, like, this shit's always been wrong. Like, it doesn't make, and truly what happened is the information broke the delusion, which is why information control is so important in these groups. Because if you do have the information based in reality, you can't subscribe to the delusion. The delusion requires you to reject so much of what is reality in order to exist within it, which is why information is so tightly controlled. And that's why we could connect this to the much larger social and political issues that are within the U.S. as of current, and the information control that's being utilized. But my Susie has wandered up towards us. So I think that means that I've spoken enough on this topic, because sweet girl wants to know what we're up to. Should we give the people a peek? Oh, Susie Suze, Suzerella, Miss Snifferella girl, how you doing, baby? Yeah, hi. Hi. Yeah, how you doing, baby? That's my Susie girl. Anyway, that was me just chatting your ear off for about 47 hours about cults, but that's something that I can do without any harm or foul. Let's just talk about cults for days and days and days. Come here, my Susie Suze. What are you doing under there? What are you doing under my chair, baby? And I've talked so long that we are well past time to strain the stock, but I just turned the heat off. And I'm going to move my chair back, and we are going to do our soup night sign off. I was going to talk about Project Hail Mary as well, because I just finished listening to that audiobook, which it was a wonderful audiobook, by the way. Everyone who said it was a great audiobook was correct. And I really enjoyed the book, actually. There are like some things, again, it's one of those where it's like either you like the ending or you don't like the ending. I thought the ending was fine. It did go in a couple of different directions that I wasn't expecting to. The story in and of itself, love Strat. She's fantastic. That monologue that she does it's not technically a monologue. She's talking with Ryland in it. But you'll know the one that I'm talking about. It's like chapter 27, where she talks about how she was a history major. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I want it to be a monologue is what I want it to be. Anyway, Susie, are you ready for us to do some cuddles? We got, I ordered a heated weighted blanket, and it is on the couch, and she knows that I control the button to turn it on. So I think I might just curl up with my Suze on the couch tonight and enjoy some soup. But so I will do our soup night sign off. Thank you for my people who did join me. Thank you to my Furby Ferb who hopped in for a little bit. I'm excited for our future soup nights. I think that we're going to keep doing this. And I will learn how to live stream one day. I will figure that out. But I'm doing an okay enough job at it right now. So I'm gonna keep going with what I'm doing. Let's say that definitely next week we should make some chocolate covered pretzels. So let's look forward to that next week of doing some amount of the holiday baking that we have on our docket. And let me know if you ever want me to like actually make the soup during this, because I've only just made the stock so far. And I feel like you don't ever get to see the final product. So maybe one of these nights I'll do the second half of this and actually make the soup. It's just the first step of making the soup is making the stock. So that's what I end up doing. Anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. This was very fun, very wonderful. I'm glad I did it. This was the decompression that I needed after my very strange, weird work day. And I'm going to go cuddle with my Suze. So I would highly recommend, if you have your own Suze to cuddle with, or just whatever you want to do to make yourself feel a little bit loved and cared for this evening. That's what I'm going to ask you to do for yourself. And I will see you at the next soup night. Okay? Good night, you guys.